Good day and thanks for tuning in. My name is Leon and this is a first look at our new Review Plus methodology. We've been spending the last couple of months, Damien Blom, my colleague and I, working on this methodology, and we're very pleased to say that we are now ready for release. So this is just a early look at some of the features that will be available in this new methodology. Now, we have built this methodology entirely from scratch. We have worked through ISRE 2400 at great lengths to try and bring to you probably one of the most comprehensive methodologies that we could in terms of ensuring compliance. And as we go through this, I'm sure you'll see what we mean by that. Now, firstly, layout should be fairly familiar. So you will see that we have got the same sort of sections that we have seen in the past in Audit Lite Plus, in RAC, and we have tried to build a flow in this methodology which looks and feels similar to our other methodologies, just so that when it comes time to start training, getting used to a new methodology, you are familiar with the layout and the general processes. So if you have been using RAC or Audit Lite Plus before, it should not be too huge a step for you to step into working with our Review Plus working papers. So section 10 is where it all starts. We've got our engagement, acceptance, and continuance document. And this will just briefly take you through various decisions to make in terms of accepting the client. Now, the questionnaires, you'll see lots of yes/no answers. I'm not going to go through the detail of each question, but what I do want to point out to you is have a look at the questions themselves. Next to each question, we are referencing specifically to the ISRE paragraph to which each question relates. So if you are wanting to go and make sure that you are complying with the standards, those standards are listed in many of the questions. And in fact, wherever we could, we've included references so that when it comes time to check your compliance, check that you are addressing all of the relevant standard paragraphs, those are covered and quite easy to do. There is some carryover between working papers. So we've got documents in here. I won't necessarily go through all of them in detail. For new engagements, for the firm's independence, individual team declarations, and so on and so forth. And the results of those, just simply yes or no in some cases. When we get to 10.04, we are pulling in detail of what the framework is, but simply follow the hyperlink, complete the document, come back, and those items are pre-populated. Just in terms of other differences, for those who are familiar with RAC and Audit Lite Plus, we have changed the color scheme slightly. You will see that we're working with blue cells. That just comes as a request from some of our users to rather use the light blue than the light green in terms of where we have user entry cells. So these are not roll forward cells as they are in RAC. These are now just user input cells. So those are editable and can be used by you as required. Now, the other thing that we have done with Review Plus is we have gone and in every single working paper copied across the exact paragraphs that we're trying to address in each and every working paper. So if you are looking for the detail of what is sitting in the ISRE 2400 paragraph 29A1, you can go to paragraph 29A1 and look at what the standard is telling you, and then also we keep the references of the guidance documents, the guidance paragraphs, to be able to go and reference and go and look at as well. All right, engagement acceptance document, fairly basic, new engagement predecessor practitioner. This is just a simple questionnaire to go and take. Have we got permission to talk to the previous reviewer? Who was it? Any reasons why they haven't accepted it, and so on and so forth. Have we reviewed working papers? A fairly basic document just to take you through a few basic items on the new, if you are taking over a review from another practitioner. Now, this is one, for instance, where in the guidance there's not a whole lot that is really addressed in the guidance. So here we've gone to the IFAC guide to review engagements and also pulled some information out of there in terms of the questions that we're asking, and there we do reference that information for you as well. Moving on in section 10, if you're familiar with RAC and Audit Lite Plus, this should look fairly familiar. We're having a look at whether the firm is independent of this client, and what we've again gone and added to many of these questions is the actual handbook references. So this is the IASBA handbook. Go to the relevant paragraph and you will see what it has to say about these potential prohibitions. Also, if you are looking for what sort of safeguards you can apply, if for instance you are providing taxation services, go to this paragraph, read through it, and it actually provides you with potential safeguards that you can implement to overcome these potential independence issues, as is the case here for taxation services that I've marked. Alright. We then also give a final conclusion. Do we believe that we're independent? Are we satisfied that no prohibitions would exclude us? I.e., have we got sufficient safeguards in place? And also action 4 is actually to be completed after the engagement. So this I've done as I've completed this file. We look at the end for you to go back and just confirm that you've remained independent throughout the engagement. 10.03 is the team member independence declaration. We follow a similar pattern. There are questions, and we look for any deviations, and if there are deviations we're looking for some form of response. Just an example, I have gone and deliberately left a few blanks in this working paper. I just want to show you what happens when we get to finalization. 10.04 is just a look at the accounting framework, slightly different from the RAC version, but we are again just looking for information about how you're deciding on the applicable accounting framework to be used at the end of the day with a conclusion. Firstly, what is the framework? Is it a special purpose? And is it an appropriate financial reporting framework? That's the terminology used in ISRE 2400. Is there an appropriate financial reporting framework applied? So once we've completed all that information, it gets carried through to our engagement acceptance document and documents it there for us. We've also got a final competencies document, and here we are just looking at an overview. Who is the team members? What is their experience? What can they apply? And this file that I'm busy showing you at the moment as well, we will make this available to you in due course, either as PDF or as a backup version. Just go and have a look at what I've done in this very basic example file in terms of documenting information on these various working papers. 10.30 is an engagement letter, and on this engagement letter we've gone and copied the content basically from the IFAC guide again, just so that we have a comprehensive set of contents. But we do have a number of settings that can be used or changed in terms of disclosures and entity types. If there's specific wording that you're wanting to change in terms of how it's presented on the engagement letter, this can be changed in the settings, and then you can print your engagement letter on your letterhead as well if you've got a letterhead set up in Draftworx. Right, that's basically all that we have in section 10, which is the engagement setup, engagement acceptance, and finishing off with this engagement letter. This all carries through back, as I say, to 10.00. You'll see there's also references to the engagement letter here. ISRE 2400 actually does give you the opportunity to decide not to issue an engagement letter in certain circumstances. So we make reference to that in our working paper. It's paragraph 38. So you then need something else to just provide some evidence of an agreement to certain aspects of the file. A few other basics: EQCR, if it's applicable based on your firm's requirements. South African Companies Act, we're asking specifically because we're looking for a PIS score if necessary, just so that you can document that somewhere on the file. Other than that, you'll see that there's a reference here to laws and regulations. Just have a look at this particular question. Are there any applicable laws or regulations which require a review engagement to be performed? And the reason for this question is there is a very specific set of circumstances under paragraph 33 of the standard which require review. Now, we don't have a file for that in the normal audit programs list, but we do have a specific template to address paragraph 33. And to access it, you'll see we now have a review tab. We've got this populate review programs, which works the same way as in RAC and Audit Lite Plus, which I'll show you in a moment. But then under additional working papers, there are a number of paragraphs where these items are seldom, if ever, going to be required in your engagement. And you would only need to create one of these files if you really do need it. So if we have an engagement which is specifically required by law and regulation, now we're not talking about the Companies Act says you must have a review. This is a case where there is some other legislation which, even though a review won't necessarily be applicable, you must perform a review. So there are a whole lot of queries and things that you need to look at. So as soon as you do that, it says please document this in the paragraph 33 template. You'd go and create a working paper. Let's call it 10.15. Paragraph 33 compliance. Input that file into the working papers. I can go to 10.15. There is my working paper. So in this working paper, we're specifically asked, is paragraph 33 applicable? If we say yes, it takes you through the document and ultimately provides you with the opportunity to have some form of a conclusion. Once we've used the working paper, we flick back here, and you'll see now instead of saying use paragraph 33 template, it's giving me the conclusion that I came up with in this working paper. Now I don't have a conclusion, so it's not pulling through much of use here, but you can see that there is a dynamic link between those working papers. You can go and save that anywhere. It brings in the conclusion from that working paper for you. We need to then just decide, do we accept this client, and then we can go on with the engagement. Alright, so once we have done the engagement and team setup and we've accepted this client, we can move on to the planning section. Now we start with a planning materiality. Once again, we provide you with the various paragraphs that are applicable. We have an opportunity to document who the users are of those financials. We can decide on bases. You'll see that there is a drop down available for you to select which bases you want to compare. These are input cells. We do try and as accurately as possible bring in the correct values, but please do make sure that if you are going to use revenue to base your materiality on, please just go and double check that the value in the financial statements does not differ significantly from what's sitting in this working paper. In fact, it shouldn't differ at all, just to make sure that there is not going to be a problem later on if you've linked something unusually and it's not been picked up correctly by these formulas. You have at least got an opportunity now to fix it before you calculate the materiality. And the same goes in RAC or in Audit Lite Plus. You do need to check these balances. However, we just decide which base we're going to use. Opening, prior to, in this case, I've decided on opening. What's the nature of the entity? We say it's profit orientated. Give the reason why we're going to use opening balances. And then we set out the various materiality bases. Now at this stage we are using the same materiality bases as we have encountered with our audit. We would love some feedback as to whether you feel these are the appropriate materiality bases or if we should rather follow the IFAC guide. It's percentages coming from audit. The review IFAC guide doesn't actually provide any detail of these percentages, but we'd like to get some feedback as to what you feel is appropriate. Determine the materiality. If there are specific materialities that you want to calculate, you can calculate those as well. And we also calculate a clearly trivial threshold. Please note, we do not calculate a performance materiality. That is not a term that is used in ISRE 2400. Once we have planning materiality, we can then start looking at doing a bit of a preliminary analytical review. Now, this is, again, it's a similar one to what we use in our audits. It's really just going to go and have a look at current year, prior to. Again, there is a drop down available for you to look at additional bases. So if you need to use interim or final, whatever the case might be, looking at the percentage change, and we're really just guiding you through a process of documenting reasons for any unusual variances, and giving a comment from your point of view after you've discussed this with management as to whether you feel those movements are reasonable or not. Now, where we deal with audit, we have at this point an opportunity to look at risks. But what we're looking at here is not risks, but just matters which may indicate some form of misstatement. Now, what the review standard tells us is there are two instances in which we need to design additional procedures, and that is over and above the initial inquiry and analyticals. Now, this is one of our initial analyticals. If it is a material balance, or if there is a likelihood or matters that indicate the likelihood of a misstatement, then we do additional procedures. So if you are identifying matters here which we feel are important to raise in the context of what's happening in this file, we would raise those here, and we would then go and design additional procedures to deal with these matters. Other than the variances, we've also got the ratios, and once again, you can raise comments or document matters which may indicate some form of misstatement. So that's what we're doing here in this prelim analytical. And depending on your approach, you might feel that at this point we're starting to do enough work to cover yourself in terms of the review. However, we do need to do additional procedures because we are dealing with quite a few material items, and we'll take you through that decision process in a moment. Understanding the entity, this document is very basic, so depending on how much information you feel is necessary, it might be important to go and add additional working papers and provide hyperlinks to this information. This is really just a basic structure for you to use to go and get some basic information, basic inquiries with management, start to develop a bit of knowledge of the business. You might get to something like subsequent events. There might be more information you want to document at this point. Related parties, I've just gone and documented names. You might want to document more. Estimates. I've actually made a note here just for the document that'll go out. This can either be referenced to a detailed document testing, or here just go and document what management says about their main estimates. The level of detail is based on professional judgment, and you need to make the call as to how much information you want to insert into this working paper. 12.15 is an identification of review sections, and this mirrors what we see in 10.20 in audits and with RAC or with Audit Lite Plus. And here we are going and having a look at where are our material components. Why? Because as I said earlier, material components we're required to do some additional work. We have the opportunity, if it's not quantitatively material, to say that it is qualitatively material. And I often use, if you've heard me in training before, depreciation as an example. It is not quantitatively material, but qualitatively material because I need to do some stuff with it. Now, what we do over and above that here in review is we have the option to mark it as an additional review component, where we say it's not quantitatively or qualitatively material. In this case, there are no balances. But for whatever reason, it could be that there is an account that's linked to investment income. And because there's an account linked to investment income, I say, even though the balance is zero, should there maybe have been some transactions that have gone through, and maybe they've done journals or something to try and hide that. So this additional review component, we give a level or an opportunity in this next sheet. We've termed it our primary analytical, to just go and say, well, let's look at the variances, let's maybe document, give some reference to where we've looked at the general ledger or whatever the case might be. So before we take it to the audit program, let's maybe at this point say, you know what, we're actually happy, it's small enough, it's not material, or either our analytical says it's not material or our additional work says it's not material, and we want to just close that document at this point. We conclude on this balance that it is not likely to be misstated, yes or no. So it's an opportunity to do it up front before we get to the audit programs. We're kind of skipping a little bit ahead with this, but you don't want a situation where you end up with investment income in an audit program and there's just no point in having done work on it. Sorry, I'm so used to audits, I'm saying audit program. We do call it a review program. We have tried as far as possible to use review across just to try and avoid confusion. But as somebody who's worked on RAC for the last 4.5 years, I do sometimes still trip myself up with audit and review. So what you will see here is, do we include it in our review programs based on our primary analytical review results? That's not applicable because it didn't go there. Investment income, we say no because we signed it off under the additional review components or under that analytical. But the next item, we said no, we haven't obtained enough evidence here, so we'd rather do detailed work, and therefore we're saying it's applicable to review, and it'll be carried over to a review program and a review cycle. Much like audit, we combine things into cycles. Just going a little bit further, we also ask here about estimates, really just to bring them up when we get to the review programs, to make sure that you are aware that there are estimates, so that when you design and decide on procedures, you are doing procedures that will address everything that needs to be addressed in terms of something specific like estimates in this case. Alright, once you have done this document, and you have documented, sorry, let me just go and show you in understanding the entity. If you identify matters here which indicate possible misstatement, you can document those in 12.10. Under the 12.05, the prelim analytical, as I said, you could document matters which may indicate misstatement in that working paper as well, and all of those get grouped together into this 1505, which is like our fraud and business RAC in RAC. But here what we're doing is we're just saying, well, here are the items that were likely to be misstated. What we're simply doing is deciding which components it needs to be shown in. So it's really just a drop down, which component, and then it'll go put it on that appropriate audit program. This is not a risk assessment like an audit, so this document is super simplified. It's really just making sure it goes somewhere in this file, in this review file. If you want to delete, you have got to log in and delete the item. We do just create that level of protection like we do in RAC, so that you don't delete inappropriate items. You'd need to delete it off the source first, otherwise it's going to stay there. But if you do want to delete it legitimately, you can just create a yes, tab to another working paper, and you can come back and it'll be deleted. Once you've done that, you can follow the review process, populate the review programs, and you would get review programs like you would in RAC or Audit Lite. And I'm specifically going to go and have a look at the revenue and receivable cycle review program. So having a look at the paragraphs that we're covering, there's quite a bit that's potentially happening in here. But now we are in between execution and planning, because we still need to go and identify what procedures I want to perform. Unlike RAC, there's not a sign-off here, so we go and list a whole lot of procedures for you, and you can decide which procedures you're actually wanting to perform. And you'll see that the numbers are only given once you say yes, and so you decide, am I going to perform the procedure? And once you've decided on the procedures, you would go and say, was the procedure successful, yes or no? We've got an opportunity here is, if I say this procedure is not successful for whatever reason, just so that you don't think the no means I've got to qualify, is there sufficient evidence elsewhere, yes or no? And if you still can't obtain sufficient evidence, you would need to then go and consider, well, what's the next step? So let's just scroll down. I've got all my procedures worked out, and I've got a conclusion here at the bottom. I say that sufficient and appropriate evidence has been gathered on the first two items, but the last one I say we're not able to obtain sufficient and appropriate evidence to positively conclude on this component. So other income, we've got a problem here. All right. What is the next step for us to do? Well, what the standard says is that if we are not able to get sufficient evidence, we need to go back and have a look at whether there is likely to be a material misstatement due to the deficiencies that we've noted. So that is paragraph 57. If the practitioner becomes aware of matters that cause the practitioner to believe the financial statements may be materially misstated, the practitioner shall design and perform additional procedures sufficient to enable the practitioner to conclude that the matter is not likely to cause financial statements as a whole to be materially misstated, or determine that the matters cause the financial statements to be materially misstated. So when we get to this section, we're saying because we couldn't obtain sufficient evidence above, we have to consider that this might result in a material misstatement. So then we go to the next section and we say, well, we were not able to obtain this, so we've got to go and do more procedures to specifically identify if this will result in a material misstatement or not, or potential material misstatement. You can go and add any other matters which were identified. So this is over and above the failure of a procedure in this round of testing. You might have other things that indicate that there is a material misstatement, and you can document those here, document which components it affects, and then we go and design a procedure. And once again, we have now a conclusion, but that conclusion is not I'm satisfied, it's is it material or not. So based on the evidence, we conclude that the component is materially misstated, or it's not materially misstated, or we can still say we're just still not able to obtain sufficient evidence, which could indicate some sort of a scope limitation, which is what we would consider. We've then got a whole lot of conclusions here, and the purpose here is just to confirm you've considered these items. So for instance, if there were instances of actual or suspected fraud or non-compliance with laws and regulations identified, if I say yes, it tells you please go and document in this paragraph 52 template. That's again a template we provide to specifically address that need. Okay, I'm going to make it no again. All right. So that is the audit programs. All of them will be designed like this. You go and decide which procedures you want to perform, or you can go and insert your own procedures. Where is the... There's the specific procedures. There are where you can go and document additional procedures that you want to perform. You would say which components it covers and so on and so forth. The procedures are a combination of procedures that we have found in the IFAC guide, as well as procedures that we had in our old review methodology. Now we've only included the old ones for those who have used our review methodology before and like the procedures, so they are available there. You may decide as a firm you're not going to follow any of these procedures, you're going to write your own. That's fine. Like with RAC and Audit Lite Plus, the procedures can be modified, and we can show you how to keep your database up to date so that every single engagement you have your procedures rather than ours populated onto your audit programs. Once we've done all of the audit programs, we need to go to finalization. Firstly, uncorrected misstatements. We go and list all of the misstatements we've identified and indicate whether or not management has agreed to adjust these. Once we've done that, we can determine what is the unadjusted amount, and we aggregate it by component as well as by financial statement area. Okay, and once we have all that information, we go and have a look at what management has decided to adjust and have decided not to adjust. Is there bias based on how they're choosing to adjust Whatever the case is, you'll see this space to document any additional information. Ultimately, though, coming to a conclusion. Are there material misstatements or not? What is the impact on the financial statements, and what impact this will have on our report? Alright, financial statements recon. It's a requirement in the standard that we reconcile the financial statements to the underlying records, be that trial balance, general ledger, so on and so forth. So what procedures are you performing in order to reconcile the financial statements to the underlying records? Go and document those procedures, sign them off. We've included it in the finalization because that's often where this is going to be addressed in terms of while the financials are being prepared. We've got a going concern working paper, just looking, are there going concern issues that have come up? Same with subsequent events. If there are, it'll take you through that process. We've got a partner responsibility checklist, which is really just a listing of a number of paragraphs where the the review partner needs to take responsibility and ensure that they have complied with these requirements throughout the review engagement, leading us to overall conclusions working paper, management rep letter. I'm not going to go through that now. It's really just simple setup. What has management agreed to or not, and it sets up that management rep letter for you. The overall conclusions is one that we're pretty proud of because this document will take you through the results of everything from the beginning of the review to the end. You'll see that we start referencing from paragraph 21 of ISRE 2400. Before paragraph 21 is really just definitions and scopes and things like that, so it wouldn't really be in your file. But every single one of these, have a look at this document about individual team member declarations. You'll see that there are deviations noted here in yellow, which means you need to go back to 10.03, fix, and that will resolve this on the overall conclusions working paper. This document really takes you through everything that's possible, paragraph by paragraph. When we get to the audit programs themselves, have the review programs, not audit programs, been signed off? It's only one I've worked on, so that's one that's signed off. Conclusions for every single component based on what we've said in the audit, in the review programs. Misstatements at component level. It also pulls out document overall conclusions based on your procedures in the review programs. Were there any undisclosed related parties? This is stuff that you sign off on each and every review program. You'll see we're going paragraph by paragraph, looking at everything that needs to be considered. Here's management representation letter, references back to that 0640 rep letter. And then we get to forming a conclusion. And there are a whole lot of requirements in terms of forming a conclusion. You'll see there's quite a lot of information that you can go and add documentation. In the setup, I've really just taken a bit of a shortcut and said yes. We also have conclusions that pull through from the various review programs that pull through. There's another one. Remember I mentioned accounting estimates. On each review program, you comment on whether estimates are reasonable, and that conclusion pulls through to this working paper. Ultimately, we get to uncorrected misstatements. Here we now just look at per financial statement area. The conclusions are carried over and we make a final conclusion. And then we go and we start looking at what is our opinion going to be. Now I've completed a few items here. I actually want to just delete the contents here. And the first question you're asked is, have you obtained sufficient and appropriate evidence? If I say yes, you'll see that it tells me the conclusion should be in terms of ISRE 2400.74. If I say no, it asks me another question. Have you determined, based on the procedures performed and evidence obtained, that the financial statements are materially misstated? If I say yes, there's another question. Is it pervasive or not pervasive to the financial statements? If I say yes, what happens? Qualified in terms of paragraph 78. If I say it's not pervasive, it's an adverse in terms of paragraph 79. So we've gone through the whole decision tree in order to assist you in designing or deciding on the appropriate conclusion. Is it unqualified, adverse, qualified, or a disclaimer? All of those options are built in based on the questions that you answer in this conclusion working paper. You then have an opportunity to document your actual conclusions. In time, we will flesh this out a little bit and possibly even create a way to push this information straight into the financial statements. We'll probably do that once we've done our update of the RAC methodology, because then both of those will require some form of transfer of information. Document other matters, document emphasis of matter, document any reports on other legal and regulatory matters. And then there's also a checklist of everything that should be included in your report. Now, if you use our review methodology, our review report on the financial statements, all of these should be there because we've copied it from SAPS 3, but this is just a checklist to ensure that you comply with all the requirements of a review report. All right, final partner sign-off. You've got your conclusion in here. You've got everything you've captured in terms of conclusions in your file on this overall conclusions working paper. And that basically is a review. The setup time obviously is going to be significantly less than an audit, but we believe that the way we've structured it should hopefully be a lot easier to follow than our existing review methodology, which was well overdue for an update. We've created some familiarity, as we've said, with RAC and with Audit Lite Plus in terms of the flow, because you do the same things. You populate the programs, you decide on what you're reviewing. You don't have a million not applicable documents. What's in here is applicable to your engagement. And if I just scroll through, okay, obviously there's some items here that I haven't actually gone and edited and signed off. But these items are required documents. They're not optional documents that you have sitting in your file throughout your engagement. Okay, folks, that was a very quick overview. We will release in due course a more comprehensive training video, which will go through each working paper individually. This is really just to whet your appetite, and looking forward to the release in the next few days. I'm on the 7th of November. I'm hoping that it's out by actually tomorrow, the 8th. We'll see if we can get the final items closed and tied up before then. But please, would you send us your feedback, your comments, ideas, suggestions, thoughts. As always, Draftworx is built around what you're looking for, what you're wanting. So please let us know, and if there are ways that we can accommodate or improve, we'd love to do that as we roll out and as you implement the new Review Plus methodology for the first time. So thanks very much for your time. Greatly appreciate it, and looking forward to hearing from you. Thanks very much. Good night.